I wanted to cover the topic of ISIS once again. I have more information that ISIS and Israel not only have mutual interests in the Syrian region, but may very well be one and the same.
Well, Avi, we are at one of the most strategic and violent crossroads in the entire Middle East right now. Tell our viewers where we are and why it's so important.
We are located on a place called Tel Saki. It's in the center part of the Israeli part of the Golan Heights, and we are looking that direction, which is to the east. And actually, Eric, what you see in front of you is part of the Syrian side of the Golan Heights, which is a stage for a massive battles that has been going on in Syria for the last couple of years.
Tell us some of the major players we have right now, a stone's throw from where we're standing, who are slugging it out, enemies not only of Israel, but of America and the West.
Let us talk first about specifically the district of Daraa that we see right in front of us. 2 out of the 3 major developments happens right now in that district that you see right in front of you. One of the development is the fact that there are pockets right in front of you in a distance of 3, 4, 5, 6 miles away from where we are right now. There are pockets of ISIS.
So, Avi, you're saying ISIS is here, just a few miles away from where we're standing right now, a short distance. It's no wonder that over your shoulder, as we see, we have UN observers who are looking out over this district in Syria. So pockets of ISIS. Avi, tell us who they are and what they're doing here.
ISIS factors in that specific region, Daraa, which borders both Israel as well as Jordan.
Right.
We estimate the numbers in a couple of hundreds militants at the most. It is known under the name of Jaish Khalid bin al-Walid, the army of Khalid bin al-Walid. And they are scattered in some towns a few miles away from here, very close to the Israeli-Syrian ceasefire.
So this is straight from the horse's mouth. People connected to Israeli border force are admitting in 2017, May 26, that ISIS is right on Israel's border. And you can see the exact same thing occurring in 2014 and the exact same thing occurring even today. So they've been in the Golan Heights for a good 5 years at least. Now, I'm just going to go on to this, and bear with me, folks. I know this is old news, but you'll see where I'm going with this. Israel will never return the Golan Heights to Syria, says Benjamin Netanyahu. And of course, this is CNN. United Nations peacekeeping forces near the border with Syria in the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights, as you can see there. Israel's Prime Minister has declared that the Golan Heights will remain permanently under the country's control during Israel's first cabinet meeting held in the territory. Quote, "The time has come for the international community to recognize reality, especially 2 basic facts," said Benjamin Netanyahu during a cabinet meeting on Sunday. 1. Whatever is beyond the border, the boundary itself will not change. 2. After 50 years, the time has come for the international community to finally recognize that the Golan Heights will remain under Israel's sovereignty permanently. Now, this goes back to April 18th, 2016, definitely between the period of time in which ISIS is operating in the area of the Golan Heights. UN observers have also blasted Israel, giving numerous amounts of shipments and cargo directly to ISIS fighters in this area. Nothing new. Now, of course, if you saw my previous video on this topic, you'll know that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud neocons in Israel are directly calling on Putin and the Russian regime and Donald Trump and the US administration to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And again, I'm just going to try and get through this really quickly to show you exactly where it is. Of course, this is Israel, West Bank, there's Lebanon, and that's Syria. So this little piece of land here is what we are talking about. Now, most of the people who watch this already know. Now, here's the breaking news. Syrian air defense repels Israeli attack on airbase, downs several missiles. Here's the article. Well, it's just a paragraph. A military airbase in Syria's south, known as T4, came under attack late on Sunday, state media reported, attributing the attack to Israel, which did not comment on the incident. Several missiles have been intercepted by the anti-air defenses of the T4 base, which is located in Homs countryside. And one attacking aircraft was hit as well, according to reports. There was no information on potential damage and casualties immediately available. Israel was previously blamed by Russia, Iran, and Syria for attacking the T4 airbase back in April. I'll get to that soon. The strike killed and injured several Syrian servicemen and Iranian advisors at the compound, and it also incited damage to airfield structures. Now, this is significant because we see Israel once again directly attacking an airbase in Syria, specifically this one called T4. Now, T4, if you look here, here's where it's here on the map. I'll just zoom out so you guys get a better idea. Okay, there's Homs, just outside the region in the countryside of Homs. Now, if you zoom in, you got to ask yourself why, first of all. Google, and this was last updated in 2018. You really have to ask yourself why they're censoring the runway. I don't know why Google's doing that, but they are. They're also censoring little pockets of area here. You can see that's clearly jet black. Other areas as well have clearly been blacked out.
Well, actually, there's road lines. The road lines have been bloody blacked out as well.
Yeah, they just airbrush it. See around the airport hangars?
And yet they don't black out the hangars. Alrighty.
Yeah.
You black out lines on the road, but you don't fucking black out like the hangars and shit. Nah, that's fine. The hangars are fine. Who cares about that? But fuck those roads. Those roads are a deadly threat.
And even over here, you see the this area here has all been censored out as well. Now, why is this significant? This is significant because, in my opinion, ISIS, well, this quote-unquote Syrian rebel group known as ISIS is actually the one and the same thing as Israel. Israel have been financing these quote-unquote Syrian rebel groups to the tunes of millions of dollars through defense contracts and basically, I mean, actually, not basically, but actually giving them cargo, weapons, aid, all of that sort of stuff. And I'll get more into that a little bit later. But this Syrian Air Force defense attack is on 8th of July, 2018. So this just happened yesterday. Now, if you do a little bit of searching on this T4 base, you find that during the 1970s and the 1980s, the Soviet Union was given access to the T4 airbase for the periodic deployment of naval aircraft. So Russia have had access to this area since the 1970s. And this is significant because if you go back in history, back to Tuesday the 24th of May 2016, we have Syrian airbase used by Russian damaged in ISIS attack. Okay. US intelligence company Stratfor says satellite images suggest 4 helicopters and 20 lorries destroyed at T4 base. And again, that's this space here. Now, what we have yesterday is Israel attacking what ISIS was attacking back in 2016. I'm just going to read a little bit of this article. This is an archived version of a Guardian article that I saved because I didn't like all the pop-up ads. I'll just read a little bit. An entire Russian helicopter unit based in Syria was wiped out in an Islamic State attack, satellite images appear to suggest. The attack on the 14th of May targeted a strategically significant airbase in central Syria used by Russian forces, and again suggests ISIS forces are trying to operate outside the territory held by the terror group to undermine the regime of Bashar al-Assad. I'll just scroll down a little bit because I want to get through this as quick as I can. Where's that part that I was going to read? The T4 airbase is described as one of the most important in Syria and is near the historic city of Palmyra, recaptured from ISIS by Assad forces a month ago. So you can see even here, this is the second time, at least according to The Guardian, which according to The Guardian itself is the most trusted news source in the world via user rating, because they had this big vote, I think last year, to see which was the most popular source. People thought it was going to be CNN or Fox News or whatever. They actually weren't rated very high. The Guardian came in first place. So it doesn't get much more mainstream than this. Now, so we have ISIS attacking this base in 2016. We have Israel attacking the same base yesterday. I'll move on. According to Stratfor Global Intelligence, here's one of the photos. There are a few, but this was actually one of the better quality ones that I found. Now, if you go back to February the 10th, 2018, a few months ago, Israel launches large-scale attack in Syria after fighter jet crashes. Again, this is an archived copy from The Guardian. Military spokesman says 4 Iranian targets near Damascus were destroyed in retaliation. So again, people need to try to read between the lines, because they always try to lump in Iran and Hezbollah as an excuse for attacking a country that has nothing to do with Iran or Hezbollah. It's typical Israeli excuses, basically. Anyway, so this is back in February. Israel has launched what it described as a large-scale air raid in Syria after one of its F-16 fighters crashed while under Syrian anti-aircraft fire. 12 sites, including 4 Iranian targets, which basically just means a target of interest to Israel, near the Syrian capital of Damascus, were destroyed in the raid, according to an Israeli military spokesman, Jonathan Conricus. It was not immediately clear whether there were any casualties. The Israeli F-16 was shot at as it returned on Saturday morning from a raid to destroy Iranian facilities accused of launching a drone into Israel. Now, whether there are Iranian facilities in the capital of Damascus or not, I'm not quite sure, but this is the airfield that they're talking about, the same one. Now let's find where Damascus is. All the way down here. You see what I'm talking about, folks? This is why you have to do a bit of research, because it's a long distance away. Long distance away. It's pretty much, almost pretty much as big as one side of Lebanon to another side of Lebanon. Almost the size of Israel. What a joke. So this is why you have to read between the lines. Now, April 9th, 2018. Does this picture look familiar? Obviously, it's the same one as the one we were just looking at over here. We'll zoom in just to confirm. Looks pretty spot on to me. Now, this is by the BBC, which of course is mainstream news. So you have to read between the lines, but the reason I refer to mainstream news is because it can't be denied. You know, I'm not going to go to conspiracy theory websites to base facts on. Now, I know the mainstream media is obviously bullshit, but it's very surprising what they're willing to admit to sometimes if you can read between the lines. Anyway, moving on. This is April 9th, 2018. Syria conflict. Israel blamed for attack on airfield. Same airfield. The Syrian government and its ally Russia have blamed Israel for a deadly attack on a Syrian military airport. Monday's attack hit the Tyre airbase known as T4 near the city of Homs. Observers say 14 people were killed. Israel, which has previously hit Syrian targets, has not commented. Syria initially blamed the US for the strike. The incident comes amid international alarm over an alleged chemical attack on Syrian rebel-held town. The US and France has threatened to respond. Now, this is all old news, and I've actually got a video on this. If you want to know more on this specific chemical attack, I suggest you go to my channel and watch, which video is it? It's in here somewhere. Wasn't that long ago, was it? Where is it? Hope it didn't get deleted. This one here. 14K views. Some false flag bullshit for you there. Some good old CIA propaganda. Anyway, if you have seen the video, good. If you haven't, go check it out.
All of this fakery by the White Helmets was revealed by an independent journalist, Eva Barlett, who has recently been on the receiving end of a defamation campaign by Sibel Edmonds, Rational Wiki, Infowars, and other Zionist shills.
And secondly, you talk about the corporate media, the Western media, the lies, and all of this. Could you explain what you think might be the agenda from us in the Western media, and why we should lie, why the international organizations on the ground should lie, why we shouldn't believe all these absolutely documentable facts that we see from the ground, these hospitals being bombed, these civilians who are talking about the atrocities that they have been experiencing. How can you justify calling all of us liars?
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, there are certainly honest journalists amongst the very compromised establishment media. Let's start with your second question. So, international organizations on the ground. Tell me which ones are on the ground in eastern Aleppo. Yeah, okay, I'll tell you, there are none. There are none. These organizations are relying on the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is based in Coventry, UK, and which is one man. They're relying on compromised groups like the White Helmets, which, let's talk about the White Helmets. The White Helmets were founded in 2013 by a British ex-military officer. They have been funded to the tune of $100 million by the US, UK, and Europe, and other states. They purport to be rescuing civilians in eastern Aleppo and Idlib, yet no one in eastern Aleppo has heard of them. And I say no one, bearing in mind that now 95% of these areas of eastern Aleppo are liberated. The white helmets purport to be neutral, yet they can be found carrying guns and standing on the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. And their video footage actually contains children that have been recycled in different reports. So you can find a girl named Aya who turns up in a report in month, say, August, and she turns up in the next month in 2 different locations. So they are not credible. The SOHR is not credible. Unnamed activists are not credible. Once or twice, maybe, but every time, not credible. So your sources on the ground, you don't have them.
Now, many of you out there watching this already know that this was a false flag without even looking into it. The fact of the matter is, the United States has been busted on 3 separate occasions supplying US-backed rebel forces with chemical agents in the past to commit atrocities. They did so knowing what would happen, and they planned to use the terrorist attacks as a pretext for further bombing attacks over Syria and prolonging the Zionist-inspired war on terror.
My fellow Americans,
Nope.
on Tuesday, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. No child of God should ever suffer such horror. Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
Yeah. Really.
Also, guys, if you have questions for me, be sure to tag me and I'll try to get through and have a look for the most important ones. Yeah. Just before I... yeah, is there anything you guys wanted to add before I move on?
Yeah, I was sorry. I actually linked something on Twitter a second ago. If you'd like to go on my Twitter, it's something kind of relative to what's going on. And I was gonna actually mention what you like, give you some input on, you know, maybe a top like a something you should name the title. And I thought it was very relative to what's actually going on in reality. Like, but this is reality. What you're talking about, ISIS is still around, but it exists in the literal, like, as an agent, as like an asset. That's literally how it exists now. There's really not many people left in the organization. It's all, you know, al-Nusra, which is basically Al-Qaeda. I mean, which is basically Jewish-born Arabs and Yemenis and just Jews. So basically,
yeah, Netanyahu admits it himself. I think back in 2014, there's a interview with I think it's the BBC, where he talks about arming and financing Syrian forces.
Oh yeah, and all the agents, all the agents, all the Al-Qaeda, like top Al-Qaeda, like intelligence officers, a lot of them are Israeli assets, and the lower officers, of course, just like Masonic organizations, are kept, you know, ignorant. All the jihadists, mujahideen, who actually have, I guess you could say, some sort of like, loyalty or some sort of like strange sort of spirit. They're like controlled by these Israeli handlers, basically, that look like and speak like Arabs. So what's going on now is that it's really strange that ISIS, the final ISIS pocket, that can see what's going on right now is that in Syria you have a separation of jihadist forces that are controlled. In Idlib, that is the Turkish, primarily that is the Turkish CIA Grey Wolf nexus, primarily Muslim Brotherhood nexus, that is close to Turkey and Afrin. That's what that is. Whenever there's a limited conflict, it doesn't usually go actually towards full war necessarily. It oftentimes can settle out into what you have is exfiltration, where you have basically experienced officers coming back into the ranks, and they're basically building up, basically modernizing and mobilizing further. And then if there's going to be a larger conflict, it's usually in another election cycle, another 4 years. It takes a little bit more propaganda and false flags for the public to become readmitted into the the basically artificial nationalism, the crypto Jewish nationalism, to go to war, to spend for Israel and world communism. See, so right now they're exfiltrating, they're pulling assets back, and right now we don't primarily know what's going on in Idlib. Idlib is like an open situation. If you want to know what's going on, you have to follow actual Al-Qaeda sources. And I'm not talking about following real Al-Qaeda sources. I'm talking about what the mainstream media follows is Al-Qaeda sources. So if they need sources in primarily Idlib, that's going to be a direct Al-Qaeda source, like something called OGN, which is on the ground news, ran by a CNN Al-Qaeda source, CIA source. And then see on the south, where is ISIS and the Israeli mercenaries, you don't have that much media coverage, because the CIA does have more coverage in Syria than the Mossad. And that's the strange thing. The Mossad is like a shadow. And it's always been like a shadow. They're the ones in the background doing a lot of the intelligence work, acting as the managers, the key points, like the convergence points. And then when they pull back, that's when everything just collapses. The structure collapses. That's what we're seeing. It's just like a lot of other campaigns in the past, exfiltration campaigns, where they pull back, everything collapses, no one knows what happened. It's a ghost army. These are ghost armies, and they hold up these structures of rebels that would by themselves be useless, that would by themselves be nothing, right? So that's why all these non-commissioned officers and why there's all the experience they have, why they're so important, because they can pull them out and put them anywhere. They're kind of like the pilots in Britain that kept on fighting every time they went down. That's how these non-commissioned officers are internationally. They act as private intelligence officers for actual countries, but they don't say it. And they just keep on going back in the fight over and over, and they're not getting shot at necessarily. They're just working in battlegrounds,
Well,
battle
Israel's
zones.
not shooting them. I mean, have you ever heard that saying, you've got your back up against the wall? What does this photo look like? It looks like ISIS has their back up against the wall.
Yeah.
Isn't that what it looks like?
It sure does.
That's this area here. I'll just zoom out so you guys can see it a little bit better. Of course, this is Israel, and this is the area, that video we just watched before where the gentleman was talking about. If you look over this region, they were in the UN zone. Now, I'm going to move on really quickly. These are some interesting photos because obviously in the last video, you actually joined me, Charles. We spoke about the fact that they're going to build Jewish settlements in the occupied land of the Golan Heights. But this is an actual, an excerpt that you've got on your Twitter about Russian metals magnate Oleg Deripaska. I think I said that name right.
Yep.
Now, this is significant because for a very long time we know that Russia has had gas pipelines and they've been very interested in semi-precious metals in this region. They actually supply a lot of the natural gas to Europe. And this also gets into the Kalergi plan as well, but we won't touch on that. But I mean, we can, but maybe another video. I'm just going to move on really quickly. Now, this is December 4, 2017, and it's by Jerusalem Post. Israel were basically being criticized for all of these allegations that they were behind the creation of ISIS. Now, in response to this, they put out a bunch of press articles, and this was one of them. Golan ISIS threat looms large over Israel and Syrian rebels. There have long been questions about why ISIS on the Golan has rarely clashed with Israel, or not at all. When has ISIS ever attacked Israel?
Mm.
Now, of course, this is, I don't know exactly where this area is because it just says on the Israeli side of the Golan Heights, but that's obviously, that could be anywhere here, you know, but I dare say it is down towards the Jordanian border where one of the pockets of ISIS cells are. All right, in November 2016, Israel and Islamic State affiliate that controls territory of the Syrian side of the Golan Heights engaged in a brief battle. So I think they were just training and running exercises because what's a brief battle? I mean, they've been there since 2013 and they're still there today in 2018. What's this brief battle? Anyway, this is where it gets interesting. After, oh wait, where is it? Is this it? Is this the right article? Yeah, it is. All right, I'll just read a little bit of this and I'll skip down. After coming under small arms and mortar fire, Israel responded with an airstrike that killed only four members, of the ISIS group, which go by the local name of Army of Khalid bin al-Walid, JKW. And I'll also get into how the Kurdish resistance ties into all of this because there's about 5 different main Kurdish freedom fighting quote unquote regimes, and at least 2 of them are sponsored directly by Israel. More on that soon. Okay, now since then, the part of the Golan border has been quiet. However, with the southwestern Syrian ceasefire in force and with ISIS almost defeated, no thanks to Israel, mostly thanks to Russia, who's also got their hands in the cookie jar, but we'll discuss that a little bit later, in the rest of Syria. It seems a matter of time until ISIS on the Golan will be in the spotlight again. Well, almost 2019 and nothing. Now, where's that part I was going to read? Okay, here. There have long been questions about why ISIS on the Golan has not clashed with Israel. In unclear comments in April, former Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon referenced the November 2016 clashes. Obviously, he's talking about this little tiny skirmish with ISIS and said, ISIS opened fire and apologized. I'm going to read that again. And this is Jewish mainstream news, the Jerusalem Post. ISIS, now this is Defense Minister for all of Israel, saying ISIS opened fire and apologized. Just think about that for a moment. Now, Al-Tamimi, this is where the damage control comes in. Because they had to say something because all these people started releasing articles. Oh my God, we've got the proof. Al-Tamimi says, the comments reflect a misconception of what really happened. Of course. Quote, no evidence supports the claim of an apology. unquote, he said. Instead, the attack on Israel was likely conducted by a few members of the group, and other members of the group did not seek a wider conflict. Well, of course they didn't. Anyway, I'm going to chuck this. Now, this is why I read mainstream news, because sometimes it is amazing what they're willing to admit to. I'm going to chuck this in chat. I really hope you guys check it out for yourself.
It's ironic, right?
Oh, I mean, who needs to go to a conspiracy theory website when the
Oh, I know.
mainstream
That's
media is
why
just, it's full of
I use
gold.
sometimes I'll use Stratfor to literally expose the entire Zionist thing. You know, with the Semyon Mogilevich being connected to Israel. I mean, they expose it themselves, and I have one excerpt from it, and it's like, wow, that's basically it. And forget about history, you know, and
I'm gonna
that's
move
basically
on.
what Israel's saying, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to move on real quick with this article from Haaretz News, which is left-wing mainstream Israeli news. This media. This goes back to February 21st, 2018. To push Iran back, Israel ramps up support for Syrian rebels, arming 7 different groups.
Yeah.
All right. With the Assad regime's advances, the civil war, and America's reduced involvement in the region, Israel has been forced to make significant changes in its policies in the Golan Heights. Well, it's not a significant change because we've seen since at least 2014, Israel has been arming and financing ISIS. Now, what do you see here? 2 ISIS fighters cruising around in the UN part of the Golan Heights. I mean, they literally mercenaries for Genie Energy and some of the oil drilling companies operating in the Golan Heights, which are sucking all of the resources out of the Golan Heights before they build the Jewish settlements. It's
Yeah.
classic.
It's so calculated. These are calculated people. People are so gullible.
But I'll just quickly read this article from Haaretz. Now, this again is from February 21, 2018, and it's obviously from Haaretz. To push Iran back, Israel ramps up support for Syrian rebels, arming 7 different groups. Now, obviously, due to Putin's support of Assad and Assad's regime, ISIS pockets have apparently, as far as we can tell, declined. They are going down. They are losing power. And I'll start reading here. The recent tensions along the Israeli-Syrian border have been mainly aerial, but due to developments in the Syrian civil war, real changes are also taking place on the ground in the Golan Heights. You know, where they're going to build all the Jewish settlements. The Assad regime, which has gained the upper hand in the war, is now focusing on aggressively attacking rebel enclaves east of Damascus and in the northern Idlib province, but it also gradually bolstering its presence in southern Syria, including the Syrian Golan Heights, and accordingly, Israel is altering its development to prepare for what's to come. The de-escalation agreement for southern Syria, which the United States, Russia, and Jordan signed last November, included a promise to keep Iran and its affiliated Shiite militias away from Israeli border. Israel wanted the Iranians and their agents to be kept almost 60 kilometers from the frontier east of Damascus, but it didn't get its wish. The agreement committed to keep them only 5 kilometers from the front lines between the regime and the rebels. Now, I'll just quickly show you this map. This is called, and remember, you have to read between the lines because they keep chucking Iran in there, Hezbollah in there, which is all a load of shit, in my opinion. And it's not a civil war. I've discussed this in at least 100 different videos in the past. I'm not going to get into it. Watch the previous videos if you don't understand why. It's not a civil war. Now I'm going to go to this article really quickly, the Jerusalem Post. And this is from October 17th, 2017, last year. Syrian army claims to find Israeli-made weapons in IS hideouts. Now, this is something I've also spoken about in the past. It should be no surprise that ISIS is using mostly Israeli and United States army equipment, guns, mortar shells, all of that sort of stuff. Israeli-made weapons were allegedly discovered in Islamic State hideouts in northwestern Syria by regime troops on Monday. According to Syria's state-run Sana News, troops found a variety of arms, ammunition, telecommunication devices, including an Israeli-made artillery piece, 800 mortar shells, a machine gun with 10,000 bullets, in addition to an amount of bullets of 17 millimeters, 14.5 millimeters, and 30 millimeter machine guns, and an RPG rocket-propelled grenade launcher, 3 RPG launchers, and a number of telecommunication devices. It would not mark the first time that Syrian media reported on regime troops finding weapons with Hebrew markings on them. Now keep this in mind. This is Israeli news. Even Israel admits it, okay? You were getting it straight from the horse's mouth. Literally. Now, last June, Syrian media reported that regime troops in al-Wahi neighborhoods in Homs, remember that area, Homs, where the airfield was attacked that we were talking about earlier, first attacked by ISIS and then attacked by Israel? So these regime troops in the neighborhood of Homs captured dozens of anti-tank missiles along with tons of ammunition and explosives, some with inscriptions in Hebrew. In April 2016, so last year, Syrian media reported that troops in the southeastern government of Salwayadi seized Israeli-made weapons that were supposedly designated for Islamic State. According to the reports, a vehicle coming from Dari was confiscated carrying Israeli-made mines with Hebrew writing on them, as well as mortars, RPGs, and hand grenades. Now, this is the best part of the whole article. It was not immediately clear how Israeli weapons got there. It's not, oh boy, we don't know, Goyim. They've got all our weapons, but they just appeared there, you see. Oi, why would we give them weapons when they're ISIS? You see, they're our enemies, Goyim. You can trust us. All right, now, this ties into what you were talking about earlier, Charles, with the whole Genie energy stuff. Obviously, this is a very old article back from 2013. And off the top of my head, that's probably around the time the Civil War started up. Now, Israel grants first Golan Heights oil drilling license to Dick Cheney-linked company. Israel, even though they do not have the legal rights to do this, Israel has granted a US company the first license to explore for oil and gas in the occupied Golan Heights. John Reed, Financial Times reports. A local subsidiary of the New York-listed company, Genie Energy, which is advised by former Vice President Dick Cheney, and whose shareholders include Jacob Rothschild and Rupert Murdoch, will now have exclusive rights to a 153 square mile radius in the southern part of the Golan Heights. You know that southern part of the Golan Heights where, you know that area? The geographic location will likely prove controversial. Israel seized the Golan Heights in the Six-Day War in 1967, around the same time Russia was setting up their military bases there, and annexed the territory in 1981. Its administration of the area, which is not recognized by international law, has been mostly peaceful until the Syrian civil war broke out 23 months ago. So there you go. It's all been orchestrated, folks. The whole thing's been orchestrated. Now, I'm going to play... I want to get you to talk about some of these photos on your Twitter, Charles. But before I do that, I just really want to play 2.5 minutes of this video. So I've got to turn my microphone off and... how do I do it again? Oh, that screen's really distracting. All right, so I'm going to go over to stereo mix. Bear with me 1 second. We'll play this video.
Just under 2 weeks ago, an American energy firm called Genie Energy announced it had been granted a license for oil exploration in the Golan Heights. The license was issued by the government of Israel, which gave no details except to confirm media reports of the announcement. Some would argue there is cause for shareholders and the Israeli government to be hush on this matter. The Golan Heights is an occupied territory belonging to Syria, which means Israel's presence here is illegal, and Israel's exploitation of resources here is also illegal. In the 1940s, when the mandate was being executed, the Golan Heights was a thriving apple farming community, with hospitals, schools, a bustling town, and churches and mosques that served a multi-faithed Syrian community. In 1967, when war broke out in the Middle East, Israel forcefully took the Golan Heights in a land grab that was to continue into the next 45 years. It displaced a large part of the 400,000-strong indigenous Arab population.
The war against us all. This war in Iraq isn't the end, it's the beginning of wars to come, all around the world, at the whim of the neocons in the White House. This is the Bush doctrine come to life. War, war, and more war. War brought to you by the big corporate masters who run the show. This isn't just a war on Iraqis or Afghanis, or even Arabs or Muslims. It is ultimately a war on us all. That's because the billions and billions of dollars that are being spent on this war, the cost of tanks, rocketry, bullets, and yes, even salaries for the 125,000 plus troops, is money that will never be spent on education, on healthcare, on the reconstruction of crumbling public housing, or to train and place the millions of workers who have lost manufacturing jobs in the past 3 years alone. The war in Iraq is, in reality, a war against the nation's workers and the poor, who are getting less and less, while the big defense industries are making a killing, literally. What's next? Iran? Syria? North Korea? Venezuela? We've already seen the corporate media play megaphone to the White House to build and promote a war based on lies. War is utilized by the imperialists first and foremost to crush internal enemies. We're seeing the truth of his insight.
We have no specific intelligence of particular plots.
Okay, I'll tell you why it ended with Tony Abbott, because this is a video I did back in 2014, almost 5 years ago. And I was basically exposing the fact that Rupert Murdoch, who owns 90 or 80% of the mainstream media in Australia, including newspapers, magazines, all of that sort of stuff, and again, whose mother is Jewish, and who's obviously connected to the Bilderberg Group and all of that sort of stuff. He's been promoting Tony Abbott, well, at the time, this is back in the day now, and I've been trying to wake people up to this fact for almost 5 years on the Golan Heights. And Tony Abbott, if you go back to the start of that video, somewhere in there, it talks about Tony Abbott going on about the death cult. Remember how he used to call it the ISIL death cult?
Oh,
Sure
yeah.
Yeah, he used to call it the ISIL death cult, and how, you know, we're on red alert, we're on high alert, very high alert, extreme high alert, imminent threat alert, all of this sort of stuff. And at the very end, what does he say? After all that's been done, there is no actual reports of any threats. So it's a whole farce. And it's been pumped up by none other than people like Rupert Murdoch, who is one of the main people who are going to benefit from all of this. And of course, his son, James Murdoch and Lachlan Murdoch, who are also getting into the casino industry in Australia and who own media in America and Russia too. They're the ones that are benefiting from all of this. I mean, it's in their best interests. And this is what I was talking about before with ISIL, with their backs to the walls.
And then this is insider trading for the next 7. Wait, so I'm not sure when that picture was taken of Rupert Murdoch. If you go on my Twitter, you'll see it. It's a really young picture of Robert Maxwell and Rupert Murdoch, I think from the 60s or 50s. I don't know. But I mean, that's at least 60 years of insider trading. I mean, think of what Fox influences today. Think of what Murdoch and all his connections to the Chechen mob and Cheney. Think of what his his connections do, and think of think of all that and all that influence he has on the markets.
Can you explain this? I don't know if you can see the screen, but
Oh yeah, I found that on the CIA website, and I thought it was interesting. And I thought the date was the most interesting part. The date that it was created, or I think published, was 1948, and that was basically the year that you had. That was like between the years of 1947 and 1950 and 53, between Stalin's death. And
it was also
it's
the same
very
time, roughly, the CIA was created. It was also the same time.
Yeah,
UN
Jewish
really
exoduses.
Yep.
Yeah, the Jewish exoduses. I would call them intelligence exoduses because you do have intelligence apparatus moving to another country. That's a big thing. That's like a class. It's a class of people just moving to another country. So yeah,
this is a plan that's been going on since at least the 40s. So all of World War II, the 60 million deaths, all of those people that had to die was because of
So the Jews can move from the Soviet Union into Israel over time. The Soviet Union did that. They had multiple exoduses from 1950s all the way up until 1980s to the very end, until the Soviet Union collapsed. So they were transferring populations. And the thing is, at some point, you can't really do it. Like the only thing you could do for population transfers, like mass population transfers of hundreds of thousands of people, is literally to steal software like Promise and sell an entire country out to the Soviet Union. I mean, that is pretty traitorous. I don't know how nobody knows. I mean, I could go on the internet and find a picture of Rupert Murdoch with Robert Maxwell, but nobody can talk about him except you. And I mean, really, something seriously scary is going on. I personally think it has to do with Promise and ARPANET, okay? Because nobody talks about how, I mean, see, Brendan mentions how Promise was the forerunner to, I think, called what was the that program for the NSA that Edward Snowden released? What was it called? Palantir. Palantir. Yeah, that came from Promise, okay, and it's ran by Israel, all of it.
Not to brag or anything like that, but one thing that I haven't heard other people talk about on YouTube is something called the Five Eyes. Now, the Five Eyes is the collaboration between 5 intelligence agencies, which is obviously Australia's ASIO, the New Zealand intelligence, Israel's Mossad, the CIA, and I'm missing one, British MI5 or MI6, one of those two. Now, they've been doing this for a long time. They've been transferring information, sharing information openly for a very long time. I mean, many, many years this has been going on and nobody seems to talk about the Five Eyes. So that's another thing that I'm probably going to focus on in other videos in the future. But I'm going to try and get through this really quickly. I'm just going to share another video, so I'm going to have to turn my mic off real quick and we'll play this video. Oh, the reason I'm playing this video, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry.
I forgot to mention, the reason I want to play this video is because Arabs don't choose names like ISIS. It's very, using acronyms and letters and all of that sort of stuff is, it's not an Arab thing. And we can hear it straight from the horse's mouth in a second.
You tell the story about how you tried to find out what they call the Mossad when they deal with publicly?
I thought it was a reasonable question, but the trouble is you can't pick up the phone book. There's no Langley in Israel that you can look up CIA, or in our case, the Mossad. We thought we should ask, what shall we call it in English? You can translate the Hebrew words. As I said, Mossad is institute. But when they write a letter to their friends in the CIA or the British intelligence. What do they call themselves? It took a while. It was a matter of asking the Prime Minister's spokesman. The best you could do, because officially the Mossad is under the Prime Minister's office. And I think he sort of wondered why you want to know and all that, so we explained. And he came up with the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. I mean, if it were to have initials, it would be ISIS. Just simple words like that. Interestingly enough, kind of a British model. The British don't really like the names MI5 and MI6 for their foreign service.
We're
Well,
not
look,
our
I mean,
allies.
it's really simple. You know, a lot of the Syrian people who fight for ISIS are, as Putin calls it, his words, not mine, they're mercenaries. Now, if you look at this other photo that I had up before, you'll notice that a lot of them are also Chechnyan, who obviously, in my opinion, I'll get into this in another video because we're running out of time, but a lot of the Chechnyan terrorists in Russia are actually government sponsored, and by government I mean the Russian government. So there's a big plan because, you know, even before World War II, even before World War I, we know long before Herzl was the head of the World Zionist Organization, not Jacob Rothschild, Lord Rothschild, I can't remember which Rothschild, but one of the many Lord Rothschilds was financing all of these missions and trips into Palestine at the time, before it was under British mandate, when it was still under the Ottoman control. And what they basically did was they'd go into Palestine, into a random area, and basically build a fence around them because there weren't really any laws to stop them doing it. And they thought, oh, you know, many of the Palestinians didn't really care. They didn't really anticipate what was going to come.